So I'll read first from this this collection of epigrams that I started in late 2008, mostly written in 2009. I tried to record one concentrated thought for each day of the first year of my son's life, Felix, and the output was called Life X. That children are fixable is a first principle we rehearse with a nervous hand on a saltwater slate. No child of labor is a commonplace. There are models for living, there are suppositions, there are replacements. Hydrocarbon and human in broad daylight, they're all made up for the war. On the topic of infrastructure and recovery, the president insists there is no pride or authorship. Quotation is the paternity of reclamation. I had hoped to trust the models of living born in this literature, but grew particular nursing the postulates of combat. Infancy is first works in days where fancy is a refusenik. To repeat is not to revoke the moment of this invention, but to live the promise of our resourcefulness. Equanimity is expensive. Gaza, God Kings, and Rongo Rongo. These species of fact, each remaindered and equidistant. Who'd beg an axial heart of present imperfection, where good governance is just a part of some seedier inventory? My generation is shy to talk of our generation, yet we continue to talk about reform. This fierce normality, the feed and the waste, the taking in of rough units like dispensation and jubilee, there must be a more assertive name for it. An upstanding voice like a door creaking into shallow morning light. Every fluorescence ignores its allotment garden. Crying is born of revival. Vitalism and geography are an apposition where containment is the apposite refuge, the expression of milk into a bottle. Meanwhile, one has to remind oneself that these gestures, a smile, a reaching out, are merely the affects of a nervous system calibrating itself. One doesn't seek explanation at the teat. It will be lost without these ambiguities, the slapstick warmth, the muddled cries, the abiding nourishment. Economy is cruel. You cannot refine it. Living as we do, how can we afford not to? Brainerd said that air is the only hope, even as foreign matter is the first dilemma of negative philosophy. Discourse of a breakfast companion, fart, grunt, raspberry, belch. Cartoon or no, Brainerd was right when he said air is the only hope. We are a namely people. There's a film called Old Joy, and then there's the bumbling through much guesswork with tongue tip pressed firmly into palate. Puzzling over some Lucretian postulate, one finds nothing comes from nothing absent God's will. But could he mean anything, a swaddled abstraction, like the wild ponies of Assateague or You Love? My son is a thought bubble in the thought bubble resistance. True to form, he's attempting to disprove this. We don't even know you, squirmy improvisation, and you don't know you either. The evening was really unusually beautiful. The margin of youth is too narrow to demonstrate, and you don't know another you. In love, too, dirt builds up in the hands in threads of black, like veins on a shrimp. Hope is not a youth movement, but buries its young in the tide. Poetry is a commitment to food access. Men of progress are particularly embarrassed. Quotation or paternity, it will change you in the middle of the day. Animal spirits depend on trust, but a father's creed begs for ruder adhesive. Dogs make a vocation of risk assessment, though their detailed talent is solicitation. They beg to inform you and beg to take leave to disagree. But for risk, they know no proper scale. A car door in the night, a gunshot, a shuffle in the bush, equivalent evidence, owed equivalent witness. They rumble, they pulse, and shoot blanks in almost every case. They are the least legalistic of animals. Insomnia should be an elective art. It lacks charm as a service industry. The parent is a sleeping guard, the object of sleep an escape artist. These roles are conventional, but constantly litigated under breath. There is a wheel of habit, and then there is acceleration. A newborn treats fruit and aspirin with equal suspicion. At the border with Egypt, aspirin is permitted to pass through while fruit is forbidden. The national interest is a lever against fruit. It's impossible to say yes loudly enough to escape the terms of the contract. Liquid is the product of youth. Active apprehension in its infancy is marked by fluid pouring from the mouth. Still, scholars model knowledge on rafts and pyramids, structures instrumental and complete, pivoting on virtue, indifferent to excess. A hospital's exits are narrower than the average human tear duct. This is the structural advantage that defines its essential character, continence. That its later is the one thing of which we can be certain. To speak of the complacency of the child is to give the concept of sin some intelligibility. A smug child, a sinning child. These are ciphers or falsifications in isolation. Though it's unclear who the agent of sin is when one anticipates a ruinous future. The hospital is anodyne with care. Its promises are few, yet its absorption is total. It cannot release you without proof you will survive it. So last year, my first daughter came. Her name is Ottolineal, and this is the same project for her that I'm working on at the moment. It's called Ottolineal. Naming is the daughter of perplexity. Speciation is first an art. Never lacking substance, speciation is also the daughter of the art. Dreaming of Titian, but the soul is bisque. Perplexity in the face, roseate at the surface, bluest at the root. The name is a directive, but reluctant to observe. What something means is often less critical than what something could mean. The future is what we have to live with, after all. The future is the daughter of our concession. Mischievous daughter, like the epigram, a portable form of life that demands allegiance, but not taxonomy. The optimist view of curiosity is that we like many things. The pessimist that things in their nature mean to consume us. Reserve is the daughter of disinclination. Parachutes go down easy. The daughter is the rudder of descent. Flaked substance, daughter is the letters of daughter. That the measure of daughter is pipes and clefs, and the oldest standard is gender. That gender is deaf and a vandal. That there is music and there is internment. That gender provisions for its handicaps with conventions. Sunlight is the father of extension. We know the other sense of discrimination that lives by inclusion, that we admit so many things and elevate just these to our. Why would the universe be secretive, daughter? Your face is amazing. Don't be afraid of the special ones. All these guardian pragmatists of the long, dull fiction. An old friend's work is described as merely personal, but this must be a personal complaint. Ottolineal is just a person, or not just that, but becoming that. Stupid, stupid independence. I was unaware of or had forgotten this word, ephebe. And then I think mostly of this referential ambivalence between fungus in adolescence, thinking impetuously, immaturely, opportunistically, adolescently, the messy grace of that. Art of the Wayfarer, let me curse you the gentlest way. Perplexity to be neutral and do no harm, unruled, but acknowledging her power, Deuteronomy. I'm raising this internal banner with the daughter. We must fight stupidity with color, without thinking of the daughter as a solution, owning nothing, involuntary and reverent. Departing the canon of my Jasper comfort. In the family, one frequently poses as a customer, but there's seldom room to look around. Heaven only knows a display case. Write the book about impossible people as if each a reason to live. Reason is the stepfather of living. An exemplary small boy in a damp towel composes an essay on the invincibility of scientists. Then we clean him up. The uncanny heat of a one-year-old living like that. Childhood is the period of guarantee. Can the rest be pettiness? Involuntary love, the daughter of beginnings. I try to work it out. Can the rest be pettiness? In the Watson Crick paper, innovations are offered with a phrase, "We wish to suggest." Strange that it's the hedge that sounds so hopeful, so generative. How much awe? Exactly big, Inspector. Achy humans sizing things up. Madison speaks of the necessity of auxiliary precautions. Welcome is the daughter of precaution. That a writer proposes that forgetfulness is the sign of maturity. Malala is the daughter of the whole world, her father tells the journalist. The whole world owns her. Ownership is a numerate dimension, but naive in its compass. Truth is the daughter of time, not of authority, says Bacon. So much enthusiasm requires preparation. How much awe, reverence, shame, and restraint are composite modesty in the Greek. He pushed and screwed. Faulty part, he said desperately. As with Pindar, reverence is the daughter of forethought, and elsewhere, excuse is the daughter of afterthought. The timing is dispositive. Zeus interpolated shame into the body through the anus. This was actually a refurbishment, as shame was initially forgotten when he built the human body as an emotional composite. Shame was feminine and an afterthought. It was permitted to fall out of the body if chased and discovered. This is a transparently poor construction and to be exploited. Shame is impatient in its habitat. Color is abetted by season. So I'll read a little bit from this book that just came out last week, Peeping, which is kind of a bridge work between these two, where I was trying to find a way to write epigrams less thematically, kind of in an open form. So I'll kind of read it around. In LifeX continues to be a project within it, and it has a loose taxonomy as much as I resist it throughout. Escape artists. That poetry is vulnerable to invention, that invention can proxy for egress, that poetry can prepare an exception. They think that's what it is, the black swan tool. A lie is a virgin pipe to an expensive future. Parenting, not to be confused with curatorship, it teaches asymmetrically. Like Bell's palsy, the face one places before the child loses its nerve at random, fails to manage, and self-limiting reacts to seizure with blind attention. He's delighted, and we want that. He fails to describe the world in the canonical way, and we want that. Such even prospects. The terror of an empty box when the adult aspect charms it with an emotion. The comfort of an empty room when its inventories are ready collaborators. It's animation that's the problem, the space that fills so easily, into which, soft boy, we have brought you so many strangers. Bargaining at the counter, the avant-gardist tackled the convoys of scholarship to concoct a personal best, the only one of its kind. The Ministry of Information and the waste product, anachronistic both. Before pitiless animals, it grew larger and larger, the exhibition on a string. Like moralizing to a child, there is no preparation for this, this dislocation. I'm in the same boat in the outer ring of the innocent section. No breeze necessary for the child's mind to lean forward. The happy sun throughout the day in the four castles of description, yellow, purple, blue. He pardons me my task-making, bursting into his tropical outlets to refresh the elemental world with the digressions of a visual intelligence. I don't mind that he comes first. As with Olson, there is no strict personal order for my inheritance. Those who like their discourses, what used to be called marrowy, i.e. denunciatory of the opposition, will seek vainly for what they want in Brown. Where's the entire interview? What is a mistaken belief? Like at mid-evening when it's impossible to conceive of a solitary failure and unmarketability as an accommodating landlord. Chain of title, talent agreements, failure and marketability, interviewed, mistaken for brothers. Line by Steve Melman. Any joy is adequate, parting hero. The father thinks of the son saying to the father, any joy is adequate, parting hero. Momentarily, the future is accommodationist. We say blue sky as if it were a staple, not some ambient, an ecstatic fragment. But a boy in the sleeve of a song points high on cue. Blue, blue, blue. It's a musical accompaniment. That the mean of poetry is eligibility. That poetry stages the struggle to assert an ontology. That the human spirit is too well furnished to be crowded into the future. That the quotation marks are evidence of this. Young thing, I have nothing to remind you of. Save for grammar, young thing, I have nothing of which to remind you. That poetry is essentially hostile to invention. That poetry is thankfully mistaken. Visitors to Longfellow, a German woman with a strong accent called to talk to him about the building of the ship, which she was planning to read in public, in which she called the lunch of the sheep. To understand Char's sense of acquiescence, one must understand what he chooses to sentinel, the sovereignty of the child. In the background of the visual field, the child is a charged object. To fix one's attention to him is to fall away from much of the world. At 20 months, the son is the gladdest usher. So a lot of that is kind of serious. So part of the sorry, part of the one aim of the epigram is amusement. So I'll end with some amusement. This is something I've been working on for 15 years, and I do about maybe 10 or 20 of these a year. And each one is a sentence. Each contains a character, and the character is dealing with a moment of failure in a literary habitat. And the literary habitat means that often these sentences are overwritten and in very purple. So this is sort of the purple prison of these characters. And every now and then I'll publish 100 or 200 of them. I published one called Rookies in Triple Canopy. And they recur. They come back again because failure is not a singularity. And this one is called Beggars of Life, after the old 1928 film, which was sort of a sound silent, one of those great ones. And it begins with an epigraph by P.J. Wodehouse. Providence looks after all the chumps of the world, and personally, I'm all for it. They say failure is rookie speech, Gabby, but that's the best part of the book. Consider hostage to invention. Perhaps it's difficult to assess what a bookish temper might do for Donald. Are we ever so temperate? Between the Tiara Cafe and the hockey opera, Kenneth has mastered the craft of the half solution. Better than Vincent, who forever offers his arpeggiated condolences to a fait accompli. But isn't it just so difficult when such an idea grouses, might snort that Ibn, being equally rhetorical and constitutive? Though it's Christo's professional eroticism that yielded as frequently to a practiced mossiness. Like a horse or fern, for instance, Nolan's low-key commitment is a usual talent. Margot gets a kind of buzzy little feeling one might call prospecting, like a mortgage on a loose tooth. Notwithstanding Cyril's glad puffiness, he grows otherwise a heath about the heart. See Patience slip into her inner office as though slipping into a small city in a smaller way. Canadian real estate seemed dreamish to Bobby, yet he wakes up a video slave to the chinless Fabu. Elsewhere, Irwin sweats profusely, rapping about his elusive decision support system. Come on, Pinky, who doesn't want to be the inventory bubba? Harvey might have earned his name were he other than mostly invisible. Outside of the umpire fetish, was there ever anything really remarkable about Fabienne? A successful pain distributor. I thought we were talking about Sydney. Unhappily, Carla is often snookered by opposites. Whereas Noble Vicky has placed her childish parts in the box of trial, the spookiest part is when she shakes it and whistles. But why is Gaston, of all people, trapped in this palooka chump dialectic? It's not that calculus that puzzles Ernie. He's in a parking orbit around Mama's expectorate. While Walter admits to nothing shy of demolition in this life, he appears mean and short, a styrofoam cup in the infirmary. With a poof, it's sleep all over again for Jasmine. It's a tad bizarre, Gerald, this obsession with the puppet-sized little fellow. Life the fetlock, Edith thought, but pranks overtake one, and a mole and a wimple stepped off the porch. There's nothing metaphorical about a corny chase sequence, but there's Dickie huffing away at that dirty trolley bit again. What about this, Leonard? This, does this feel good? Maybe Avery, too, is hollering out his competent shell. Oscar doesn't have a spouse, but if he did, she'd say, what's with this guy? He carries his beer glass around like a purse dog in a snit. Humphrey, dog on the brink, knows at some point even the marigolds must retaliate. You are exactly what I'm looking for, Polly, only leapier. The world is a gelatin reluctant is no real thesis, Cynthia, despite the emotional renewal attending that pastry punk in his pushy magazine. Burnett smelling mother's phone, there's just no answers for that. Arnar's optimism is unbounded. He said, snowflakes in autumn. I said, dandruff on TV. But Lewis, who'll trade a coupon for a face in fresh water if it's just your dream, Patsy? A little feline distemper and acid Rhonda throws fiction out the window. Fiction isn't friendship, Chico. A deadpan creature was Daryl, murky and viscous by design, a design announced by a white flag despite his brochures on the new leadership. It's called silent shitter music, Carter, and you wrote it. Deep down you feel uneasy, Ermine, and deep down is where you butterfingered that getaway promise. Felix was a fine troubadour with a crackling tenor and a flinty gaze, but his ballads, chiefly about hotel administration, considerably narrowed his audience. Every night George prays to become the teacher's pet of a biased god, and every morning he wakes up a fabric sample of a microblogging stunt channel. Haskell's life work was called Gab Knuckles. It wasn't well received. I was mostly certain that Jorge was quasi-indifferent, but then I came to understand that he just had chimp empathy. Destined for lateness, her stepdaughter first, Judy admits to the whittling curse. Her test against the living carries that dog in its purse. All this life married to the bright tin swan and all it contains, though most of what it contained from Martin oozed out in a tool shed in Reno with the can opener mishap fall of 1973. Noel calls himself a friend of the poets, but he's mostly just friends with a hand towel. You're a dog's dog, Sten, and that dog has its own dog. It's named Norman, and you're that dog too. No one would argue that Tilly hasn't paid her dues to the haunted unwanted. Not a problem, really. Todd has a surplus of face. At Chit Chat, Tony's herd instinct kicked in, and his talents were without ebb or brim. He could build a coterie and a style guide for bulk paper enthusiasts, and with the aid of his long-suffering family, that's precisely what he did. Thanks.